expressed, is in jail at best, if not choked off and killed. Excuse me, if not choked off and killed. Now, all of that sounds wonderful, but do you think any of these guys are going to buy that? No. How about this guy? It's not happening. It's not happening. Not yet. Not in my experience anyway. There are reasons, I believe. Within the structures and functions of the body politic, there are two very significant pieces that are very, very closely alloyed, strongly alloyed. That is, believe it or not, the healthcare system and the legal system. As much as you may agree with that, it's even more deeply connected, these two systems, than you might think. And I'm going to show you what I mean in just a second. It is these structures and functions of the body politic right now that are afflicted. Duh. Right? As my 14-year-old son would say. They're afflicted in a particular way, as I'm going to show you in just a minute. So there's the relationship between the healthcare system and the legal system. I am speaking about the orthodox healthcare and legal systems. And indeed, when they are afflicted, specifically, as I'm going to propose to you this evening, afflicted with addictions. That particular concept is very significant in what I want to share with you. They're afflicted with addictions. That's pretty much the state of affairs, what you see right there. Okay, where does this connection between law and healthcare come from? Believe it or not, and I give this particular slide, I present this slide in a number of different settings. I'm glad there isn't food on the tables. I usually have food thrown at me. Law is a healing profession. It's true. It's true. Millennia ago, in ancient Greece, doctors, or whatever they called them back then, were healers of the physical body. Counselors were healers of the mind, the spirit, the heart. And lawyers were healers of community, of culture, of the body politic, of relationships. Needless to say, we've veered far from that now. But let me give you just a very brief history of health regulation, particularly as it developed a little less than 2,000 years ago. Scholars studying ancient texts have analyzed and concluded that during this period of time, healing took various forms. Folk healing, natural healing, spontaneous healing, faith healing. But perhaps the two most conspicuous features of healing during this period of time were the last two bullet points. This healing was done by lay people. It was done, actually, let me put it a different way. It was done by virtually everyone. And, the last bullet point, it was effective. The times changed. And royalty, supported by the hierarchy of the clergy of the time, took it over and said, "Thou shalt not heal. This is our realm." Draw whatever conclusions you might about why. I personally don't think it had that much to do with money. I think it had to do very much with power, a very elemental, raw power that lies in health freedom, as I said in my premise. Well, we know how bad it got. Back in those days, there was no constitutional prohibition against cruel and unusual punishment, and the penalty for violating the healthcare licensing laws was death, and it wasn't pretty. I was interested to find this quote. It's a lot of words, I apologize, but it's worth taking note of. Because the medieval church with the support of kings, controlled medical education and practice. The Inquisition constitutes, among other things, an early instance of the professional repudiating the skills and interfering with the rights of the non-professional to minister to the poor. Quite a validation of what we're dealing with. We talk a lot about how we're up against the last 100 years with the advent of the AMA, following the Flexner Report, and that's true to be sure. The last 100 years have been significant, but it's a lot older than that, as you see right here. I'm also curious, I didn't notice this until yesterday, and I don't know how accurate this quote is, but I bet it is, where the author has researched and concluded that it was the medieval church, not royalty, in these days that controlled medical education. Interesting anecdote there. So we've evolved somewhat. No, that's right. In that, for most of the past 100 years, the penalty was not death by torture. It was merely jail, as indicated there on the left, and in more recent times, over the last, I'm going to say about 40 years or so, bankrupting fines. Merely. Another quick war story. Same client, who I'm going to be representing in appellate court on Wednesday, was fined $444,000. He practiced at Health Freedom Art for 26 years. The judge who levied the fine said this. This is almost verbatim. The court finds that John Doe has not harmed anyone in 26 years, and therefore will use that fact as a mitigating factor in levying the fine of $444,000. One shudders to think what the fine would have been if someone had complained about Lord knows what, that they caught a cold coming out of his office, I don't know. 26 years, they couldn't find one piece of evidence that he'd done anything wrong to anybody, and he got fined $444,000. The man's, anyway.
What conscience? Where's his conscience?
Whose conscience?
The judge.
Well, I'm going to show you why that's not in the equation in just a minute.
There is none.
He was charged with practicing medicine without a license. Yeah. It's good to get this out of my system, so I'm a little more grounded come Wednesday. But can you believe, anyway. Okay, so what's going on with these folks, or this dynamic that I represent by these folks? What's going on? I talked about addictions. From my experience on the dark side, from my experience working on behalf of health freedom practitioners over the last 4 years, it's my interpretation that the structures and functions of the body politic that are the orthodox legal and healthcare systems suffer from what I call 7 deadly addictions. Not unlike the 7 deadly sins. These are the 7 deadly addictions. But lest you think that I'm the one that came up with this idea, let me direct you to a slightly higher authority, at least from a legal standpoint. Professor Lawrence Tribe is the Clinton Miller of American constitutional law. He is the authority. Lawrence Tribe, his constitutional law textbooks are stock and trade in every law school, at least they were when I was there. And there is what Professor Tribe wrote almost 20 years ago. Law has not kept pace with what makes sense. There's another duh from my 14-year-old. It has lagged behind our intuitions and has yet to reflect the shift. The shift. And as a result, our legal system is deeply out of sync. That's putting it mildly. It's ill.